$100 million lawsuit. That is what the National Broadcasting Company threatened Johnny Carson with in 1979. One problem: he had found a loophole so devastating that when the network discovered it, the entire power structure of television would collapse. And when it was over, he would do something that would stay hidden for 13 years, something that proved where his true loyalty lay. For 30 years, Carson had been the last voice America heard before falling asleep. A trusted friend who seemed to belong to the nation. But he never belonged to us. He belonged to a corporation that viewed him as nothing more than a replaceable asset in its industrial machinery. Behind that effortless smile, Carson was executing the most audacious power grab in television history. A rebellion that would make him the first performer to own his own show, build a $50 million empire, and rewrite the rules that had kept talent subservient to networks since the invention of broadcasting. This is the story of the host who refused to bow. It is also the story the network tried to bury the story of choices that would cost him his closest ally, decisions that would honor his deepest principles, and a secret that would stay hidden for 13 years. The $100 million showdown. Picture this. After nearly 2 decades as host of The Tonight Show, Carson sits across from National Broadcasting Company executives and drops a bomb. He is walking away, simply leaving. The man who defined late-night television? Done. The response comes fast and brutal. Network lawyers threaten a $100 million lawsuit, breach of contract, damages that would financially devastate even someone of his considerable wealth. They engage an arbitration firm to examine his contractual obligations, confident their exclusivity clauses will hold. The legal team has done this before, threatened other performers, watched them fold, watched them come back to the table with their heads down and their ambitions trimmed. The message from the company is unmistakable. You belong to us. You cannot leave. And if you try, we will destroy you. The executives believe they hold every advantage. Carson is under contract. The exclusivity provisions were written by the finest legal minds money could buy. No performer has ever successfully challenged their authority. The system has worked this way since the dawn of broadcasting. But Carson has a weapon they do not anticipate. Money? He has plenty, but not enough to outlast the legal war chest of a broadcast giant. Public sympathy? He could make his case on air, turn America against the company, but that would violate every principle he holds about keeping his personal battles private. No. What Carson has is something they never see coming. A legal mind who understands exactly how to find the invisible cracks in corporate armor. The executives believe their clauses make Carson permanent property. Carson has other plans. And here's what makes this confrontation even more remarkable. National Broadcasting Company created its own worst enemy. Every humiliation they forced Carson to endure has been building toward this exact moment. The company thought they were managing an asset. They were actually training a revolutionary. Wait. Before we get to the loophole, you need to understand what they made him do. The monologue mess. Every single night, Johnny Carson walks onto that stage and repeats himself. Not because he forgot his lines, not because the audience demanded an encore. Because the National Broadcasting Company makes him tell the same monologue twice, word for word, joke for joke, treating America's most famous entertainer like a jukebox that can be played on command. During the 1960s, most affiliates expanded their 11 o'clock local news from 15 to 30 minutes. Suddenly, a significant portion of the country is missing Carson's iconic opening monologue. The network's solution reveals everything about their priorities. Ed McMahon delivers the monologue for markets starting at 11:15. Then Carson emerges at 11:30 and performs the exact same jokes as if telling those lines for the very first time. Every time Carson walks out to deliver that second monologue, something inside him hardens. The smile stays the same. The timing is still perfect, but behind his eyes, a calculation is forming. How much am I worth to them? What happens if they discover I know exactly how much? And most dangerous of all, what will I do when I finally have the power to make them pay? The energy in the studio inevitably dims during the second delivery. Carson, a perfectionist who prides himself on genuine connection, is being forced to manufacture authenticity twice nightly for affiliate revenue. He files that decision away for the day he will make them regret it. In December of 1966, Carson insisted the show's start time be adjusted to 11:30. By early 1967, the runtime drops from 105 minutes to 90. Small victories. But they teach Carson something crucial. National Broadcasting Company only moves when forced. To the men running the operation, Carson is not an artist. At a budget meeting in 1968, one executive circles Carson's name in the budget report and writes in red ink, "Talent equals replaceable asset." Someone in that room carries those words back to Carson. He never forgets them. The parent company, Radio Corporation of America, was built by industrialists who created a broadcast network not because they loved entertainment, but because they needed content to sell television sets. The programs were bait. The performers were interchangeable. When Carson assumes the role in 1962, he inherits a grueling format: 105 minutes of live broadcast, including live commercials. No second takes, no safety nets. Just a young man from Nebraska, a live camera, and the expectations of millions. The National Broadcasting Company owns every frame, every second, every laugh. No one has ever successfully challenged this arrangement. But for more than a decade, as Carson endures the crushing hours and complete lack of ownership, resentment builds, determination grows, until one night, Carson picks up the phone. 3 words to the man who will change everything: find the exit. The lawyer's midnight mission. Carson needs more than frustration to break free. He needs a strategist willing to fight as ruthlessly as the corporations themselves. In 1970, he found exactly that. Henry Bushkin is a young attorney who will become far more than a lawyer. Their bond is forged through something deeply personal that reveals the trust Carson is willing to extend from the beginning. Late one night in 1970, Carson calls Bushkin with an unusual request. He suspects his second wife, Joanne, is involved with another man. He needs proof. And he needs someone he can trust completely, someone willing to step far outside the boundaries of typical legal work. Imagine being a young attorney, barely established in your career, and receiving that call. The most famous man in America asking you to accompany him on something this private, this painful, this far outside your job description. Bushkin does not hesitate. He says yes. The 2 men drive to an apartment building where Carson believes his wife is meeting someone. They wait in the car. Carson's hand grips the steering wheel. Neither speaks. They watch the entrance. The minutes pass. The streetlights hum. Carson, the most recognizable face in America, sits in the passenger seat of a parked car on a New York street, wearing a hat pulled low over his eyes, waiting to discover whether his marriage is a lie. What they discover that night stays between them secret Bushkin guards for decades. But from that moment forward, their relationship transcends lawyer and client. This becomes something else entirely, a total alliance, the kind where you trust someone not just with your contracts, but with secrets that could destroy your career, your marriage, your legacy. The divorce costs Carson $20 million. $20 million gone in a settlement, gone because he had no leverage, gone because the system was designed to protect institutions, not individuals. The money makes him realize something that changes everything. If he does not own The Tonight Show, he will always be one bad marriage, one bad contract, one corporate decision away from having nothing left. Over the following years, Bushkin assumes an astonishing variety of roles: lawyer, counselor, business advisor, enforcer, running buddy, and confidant. This is not a typical attorney-client relationship. This is the most significant professional partnership of Carson's career, and eventually, the wound that will cut deepest. Bushkin understands what the National Broadcasting Company has forgotten. Carson's value is incalculable. The Tonight Show is the network's most reliable profit center, generating hundreds of millions in advertising revenue. Affiliates depend on his lead-in. The entire architecture of National Broadcasting Company's schedule is built around the certainty that Johnny will be there. And yet Carson remains contractually chained a golden goose in a gilded cage. Every year, his value increases. Every year, his ownership stake remains exactly 0. By 1979, Carson feels strangled. He is the undisputed king of late night, the primary profit center for an entire network. Yet the contractual restrictions and complete lack of ownership have become unbearable. Carson and Bushkin prepare for war. The strategy is audacious. Inform National Broadcasting Company that Carson intends to vacate his contract by 1980. Simply walk away. Let the network find someone else to generate their hundreds of millions. National Broadcasting Company believes he is bluffing. Where else can he go? What other platform can match The Tonight Show's reach? Carson is about to show them exactly how wrong they are. The loophole that freed him. Pause. Because what happens next sounds impossible. The arbitration firm examines Carson's contract. National Broadcasting Company expects confirmation of their dominance. Their exclusivity clauses are supposed to prevent Carson from ever working for a competitor. The lawyers prepare their arguments. The executives prepare their victory statements. The arbitration report lands on the National Broadcasting Company's desk. Page 1, standard legal jargon. Page 2, more boilerplate. Page 3, paragraph 4, the sentence that changes everything. While National Broadcasting Company may extend Carson's service period, the exclusivity clauses are not legally binding in their extended form. One National Broadcasting Company lawyer reads it twice, then says to his colleague, "We are in serious trouble." The room goes quiet. 20 years of corporate assumption that the exclusivity clauses were impenetrable, that no performer could ever challenge them, that the system would hold forever collapses in a single paragraph. Lawyers who had spent their careers enforcing these contracts now realize they have been building on sand. The lock on the cage has been picked. With that single ruling, Johnny Carson transforms from captive employee into the most valuable free agent in broadcasting history. And National Broadcasting Company's competitors see an opportunity they never imagined possible. Chaos erupts. Both American Broadcasting Company and Columbia Broadcasting System make offers that would make him the highest paid performer in television. They promise to double his salary, double his time off. Complete creative freedom. They paint visions of new shows, new formats, new beginnings free from the network that treated him as expendable. For Carson, who spent decades building The Tonight Show only to own none of it, these are intoxicating offers. He can escape. He can make them regret every humiliation. But then, Carson does something that reveals his sophistication extends beyond revenge. He seeks advice from Lew Wasserman, the legendary head of Music Corporation of America and Universal, a man who had built more careers and destroyed more competitors than anyone in Hollywood history. Wasserman's counsel is pragmatic. It is not prudent to ask people to change their nightly viewing habits. For decades, Carson has been the last thing millions see before sleep. He is a ritual, a comfort, a constant. To move networks would mean asking loyal viewers to break a habit as natural as brushing their teeth. You would win the money, Wasserman tells him, but you would lose the audience, and the audience is the only thing that matters. Carson listens. Then he makes a decision that proves more devastating to National Broadcasting Company than simply leaving. Rather than abandon the National Broadcasting Company, he will use the threat of leaving to extract something far more valuable than money. He will demand ownership. He will make them pay for every indignity with a piece of their empire. The negotiations that follow are brutal. National Broadcasting Company tries to call his bluff. Fine. Walk away, see if audiences follow you. But Carson holds firm. The network that once threatened to destroy him financially now faces a choice. Give Carson ownership or lose him forever. They blink first. The ownership revolution begins. What Carson demands has never been done in television history. The contract that emerges, valued at over $50 million, fundamentally restructures the host's role in television. For the first time in network history, a performer has leveraged his value into actual ownership rather than merely higher compensation. The terms are Carson's revenge, disguised as business provisions. Ownership of The Tonight Show transfers to Carson's newly established company, Carson Productions. The program National Broadcasting Company created and controlled for decades the show they built. The show they told him he could never leave now belongs to its host. Carson owns his archives, his content, every episode he ever filmed. National Broadcasting Company, the network that threatened to destroy him, will now pay him royalties every single time they want to air his old episodes. They have become his tenants, renting space on their own network. Under the revenue-sharing arrangement, Carson Productions earns an estimated $50,000 per week in pure profit. He can license old episodes back to National Broadcasting Company as the best of Carson, profiting from both original broadcasts and repeats. The company that once claimed to own him now writes him checks to use his content. Most significantly, the contract grants Carson control over the 12:30 time slot. The company that told him, "You cannot leave," now needs his permission to decide what comes after midnight. He becomes the landlord of late-night real estate he does not even appear on. Whatever follows The Tonight Show requires his approval. He can shape the entire future of late night simply by choosing who will follow him. The executives who once circled his name in red ink and wrote "replaceable asset" now have to ask his permission to program their own network after midnight. The show's runtime drops to 60 minutes, effective September 16, 1980. Carson will work 1 hour per night, 4 nights per week, and earn more than he ever did while working twice as long. The transformation is complete. Before 1980, Carson worked for National Broadcasting Company. After 1980, National Broadcasting Company works for Carson. The network that threatened a $100 million lawsuit is now his tenant. The prisoner has become the warden, building the empire. Carson thought he had won the war, but seizing power is only the first battle. Keeping it is the war that never ends. If you are finding this journey into television history compelling, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. We uncover the stories behind the moments you remember and the stories that were carefully kept hidden for decades. Do not let the algorithm decide whether you see these hidden histories. With ownership secured, Carson begins building something that will outlast his time behind the desk. Those who know him describe him as entrepreneurially apathetic, which is his polite way of saying he cannot be bothered with businesses that bore him. He closes a clothing company because he does not want to model. He shutters a movie division because watching daily footage is tedious. Carson Productions launches show after show. Some succeed, some fail spectacularly. Carson shuts down the ones that bore him with ruthless efficiency, swatting them like flies. But he is looking for something. Someone worth betting everything on. Eamon finds an audience. Television's bloopers and practical jokes becomes a hit. The film The Big Chill succeeds beyond expectations. But Carson is searching for that one talent worth the gamble. Using his control of the 12:30 slot, Carson launches Late Night with David Letterman in 1982. Letterman has been groomed through a $1 million holding deal and numerous guest hosting appearances. The launch reveals both Carson's generosity and his strategic shrewdness. He recognizes Letterman's ironic, intelligent sensibility appeals to younger viewers. But Carson protects his territory. Letterman is forbidden from having a sidekick, a horn section, or signature segments resembling Carson's routines. Yet those who witness Carson with Letterman see something the restrictions cannot hide. The older host watches from backstage when Letterman guest hosts. Carson leans forward during Letterman's monologues, not checking for mistakes, but genuinely laughing. Staff members notice it immediately. The sound is different, unguarded, real. One producer later described it as the only time he ever saw Carson react to comedy the way a civilian would, without calculation, without measuring the technique, just laughing because something was funny. Carson has not laughed at another comedian's material like that in years. When asked why he invests so heavily in a potential competitor, Carson offers a rare sentiment. Because he is the only one who is actually funny. Coming from a man who guards praise like state secrets, this is the closest thing to a coronation Late Night has ever seen. The relationship becomes mentor and protege, Letterman worshiping Carson, Carson seeing his own restless intelligence reflected. Corporate decisions are coming that will test this bond in ways neither man expects. But first, Carson will face a different challenge, one that reveals the cost of building an empire on trust. The new bosses arrive. In 1985, Carson thought he had won. Then General Electric purchases Radio Corporation of America for $6.3 billion. And suddenly, Carson's carefully built empire faces bosses who have never seen him work, never understood what makes him invaluable. These are industrialists from the very system that created the talent as property mentality in the first place. For most National Broadcasting Company employees, the acquisition means anxiety. For Carson, it means proving his power all over again. General Electric executives look at National Broadcasting Company's balance sheets and see opportunities for optimization. They see The Tonight Show generating enormous profit, but they also see a single performer with unprecedented control. The new bosses begin asking questions. Why does one talent have ownership? Why does he control programming decisions? Could we find someone cheaper? Carson's response comes swiftly, and it is delivered not in boardrooms but on the air. Shortly after the merger, he addresses the news with characteristic wit. Nothing is going to change, because I just bought General Electric. The audience erupts in laughter. It seems like just another Carson quip. But the humor carries weight only industry insiders appreciate. The Tonight Show generates more profit than most General Electric divisions. Without Carson, National Broadcasting Company's entire schedule collapses. He is not merely protected, he is the foundation. The joke is his way of signaling to the new owners, and to everyone watching, exactly where the real power resides. What executive can complain about a host whose only crime is making people laugh? The audience roars, and somewhere in a corner office in Connecticut, a General Electric executive watches the clip and realizes his most valuable asset just told the world he cannot be touched. He has built the perfect fortress. But every fortress has one vulnerability: the people inside it. General Electric's accountants start auditing Carson Productions. That is when they find something strange in the books. Expenses Carson never approved. Deals Carson never signed. Payments to entities that should not exist. Someone has been using his company like their personal piggy bank. The betrayal of trust. For 18 years, Henry Bushkin has been Carson's closest advisor, trusted with legal strategy, business decisions, and secrets that could have ended careers and destroyed reputations. Together, they orchestrated the contract that transformed Carson from employee to owner. Bushkin has been there for the fights, the victories, the most private moments. But by 1988, the partnership will end in bitter conflict. Carson discovers the truth through paperwork that crosses his desk by accident. Bushkin has been negotiating deals in Carson's name, building an empire within the empire that Carson knows nothing about. Using access and authority that Carson gave him in complete trust, Bushkin has begun pursuing his own agenda, expanding Carson Productions into ventures Carson never approved. Real estate investments. Side deals with network executives. Contracts that enriched Bushkin personally while leveraging Carson's name as collateral. For a man who values loyalty above everything, this is not just deception. This is theft of the worst kind, stealing trust. Carson had trusted Bushkin with the mission to investigate his wife's suspected affair, the most humiliating moment of his personal life. He had made Bushkin wealthy beyond what any attorney could expect. He had shared secrets that could have destroyed his reputation, and now Bushkin is using that access, that intimacy, to build something behind Carson's back. Carson's hand stops mid-signature when he sees Bushkin's name on an unauthorized contract. He stares at it for a long moment, then he picks up the phone. Bushkin's voice cracks when Carson confronts him. "I can explain." "Get out," Carson says. 18 years. 2 words. Carson terminates the relationship with a finality that shocks everyone who knows them. No gradual cooling, no attempt at reconciliation, no second conversation. Bushkin is simply gone, excised with the same decisiveness Carson brings to everything. The man who had been his shadow for 18 years is erased from his life in a single afternoon. What follows is a prolonged legal battle over compensation and allegations of misconduct. The man who had been Carson's enforcer, his most trusted advisor, becomes an adversary. It is a stark reminder that even the most successful partnerships carry risks, and that the enforcer who helps you seize power may eventually want power of his own. Carson will face his final act without the man who had been beside him through his greatest victories. Which revelation about Carson's battle surprised you most? The monologue mess, the $100 million lawsuit, the loophole, or the betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The final act. 3 years later, Carson executes his final act of defiance, a retirement announcement so perfectly timed that National Broadcasting Company executives learn about it at the same moment as the American public. In May of 1991, after 30 years as host, Carson announced his retirement. The news sends shockwaves through the industry. Generations have grown up watching him. People have marked life's milestones, with Carson in the background: first dates, wedding nights, the births of children, quiet evenings after funerals. The idea of late night without Johnny seems incomprehensible. Affiliate executives look at each other across the room. Some of them have never known a national broadcasting company that did not have Carson at its center. The ground beneath them has just shifted, and they can feel it. But the manner of his announcement is as significant as the announcement itself. He delivers the news at an affiliates meeting without giving prior notice to network executives. The suits who once threatened him with lawsuits learn their most valuable star is leaving at exactly the same moment as everyone else. Even in departure, Carson sets his own terms. What follows becomes the war for late night, a battle that will test everything Carson believes about loyalty, talent, and the system he fought to change. Carson has a clear preference: David Letterman, the host he launched, mentored, and protected for a decade. The comedian who made him genuinely laugh. But Carson has no contractual right to name his replacement. And National Broadcasting Company's decision-makers, shaped by the spreadsheet mentality General Electric imposed, see the succession differently. National Broadcasting Company chooses Jay Leno. The decision comes down to brutal calculus. Leno is viewed as a team player who curries favor with affiliates, never rocks the boat, never mocks executives on air. Letterman is seen as a wild card, brilliant but unpredictable, someone who might put creative vision ahead of corporate priorities. In a contest between brilliance and compliance, General Electric's National Broadcasting Company chooses compliance. Carson learns of the decision through a phone call from a network executive who expects him to accept it. He does not argue. He does not plead Letterman's case. He simply goes quiet, the same quiet his staff had learned to fear over 30 years. The executive fills the silence with corporate justifications about demographics and affiliate relations. Carson lets him finish. Then he hangs up. The decision represents profound irony. Carson spent decades fighting the corporate mentality that valued obedience over talent. His final battle, the one he cannot win, is whether that mentality will choose his successor. It does. The very system he challenged for 30 years wins the one decision he cannot control. What Carson does next will set in motion a secret that lasts until his passing. The 13-year secret. On his advice, Letterman leaves National Broadcasting Company in 1993 and moves to Columbia Broadcasting System, where he will compete directly against the network that rejected him. "Leave," Carson essentially tells him. "Go somewhere else and beat them. Show them what they lost." But Carson's defiance does not end with Letterman's departure. What he does next proves his principles are not performance, but genuine conviction, and it will remain hidden from the world for over a decade. From his retirement in 1992 until his passing in 2005, Johnny Carson secretly sends jokes to David Letterman. 13 years, hundreds of pieces of material. He contributes to his former protege's monologues without public acknowledgement, without credit, without anyone knowing. The most famous entertainer in America, content to work in shadows, sending ammunition to the man National Broadcasting Company rejected, helping shape the comedy that competed against National Broadcasting Company every single night. Consider what that means. Carson could have stayed silent, enjoyed his retirement, left the battle behind. Instead, for 13 years, he quietly writes material for Letterman's show. Almost no one knows. The public certainly does not know. Even most of Letterman's staff do not know. The jokes arrive without explanation, polished, perfectly timed, unmistakably his voice. Letterman's writers assume they came from anonymous contributors. They never question why the material is so much sharper than anything else in the pile. Letterman discovers the full extent years into the arrangement. He is going through old monologue notes when he notices a pattern, jokes that seem impossibly perfect, appearing mysteriously in his material at moments when he needs them most. The timing, the construction, the voice. He picks up the phone. Carson answers on the second ring. Neither speaks for 10 seconds. "Was that you?" Letterman asks. "All those years?" The silence on the other end tells him everything. Then Carson says the only thing that matters. "You deserved better than what they gave you." There is a long pause. Letterman, who spent his career channeling irreverence and detachment, cannot speak. The man who made him, who launched his career, who mentored him, who watched him get passed over for Leno, had never stopped fighting for him. Not for one day in 13 years. Carson occasionally appears on Letterman's Columbia Broadcasting System show, pointedly choosing the competitor over the network where he spent his career. Each appearance carries enormous symbolic weight. Here is Johnny Carson, the man who built National Broadcasting Company's late-night empire, sitting on a Columbia Broadcasting System set, laughing with Letterman, implicitly endorsing the competition. National Broadcasting Company executives watch from their offices across town. There is nothing they can do. The man they rejected has chosen his side, and it is not theirs. Every time he appears, the message is unmistakable. Carson's loyalty is to talent and principle, not to the corporation that once claimed to own him. To the very end, Johnny Carson refuses to bow. The legacy he left. His legacy extends far beyond the jokes or 30 years of broadcasts. Right now, as you watch this, the Carson estate is generating revenue from deals he negotiated 45 years ago. Every Hulu replay, every Netflix documentary, every YouTube clip, the royalties continue flowing to his heirs, not to the network that once controlled everything he created. The contrast with Letterman makes the achievement clearer. When Letterman left National Broadcasting Company for Columbia Broadcasting System, the network asserted ownership over his segments and characters. Beloved features like viewer mail belonged to National Broadcasting Company, not the host who created them. Letterman had to rebuild his show from scratch, leaving pieces of himself behind because he did not own them. Carson had ensured that would never happen to him. Every star who has since demanded ownership, back-end participation, or creative control stands on ground that Carson cleared. He walked into a world where networks owned everything and performers owned nothing. He walked out owning his legacy, the lesson he taught. Carson spent 13 years writing jokes for Letterman. Hundreds of pieces, never took credit, never told anyone. Why? Because Letterman asked him once, "Why did you keep helping me after the national broadcasting company rejected me?" Carson said, "You deserve better than what they gave you." That is what this was always about. Not money, not revenge, deserving better. The host who changed television taught us something essential about dignity, persistence, and standing firm when powerful forces insist you have no choice but to submit. For 30 years, he made America laugh. For even longer, the principles he fought for continue to shape the entertainment world we know today. If this story moved you, leave a like and share your memories of Johnny Carson in the comments below. Did you grow up falling asleep to his voice? Subscribe and turn on notifications. We are pulling back more curtains on the legends who shaped television's golden age. Good night.